So what does unity say about the Bible? What does unity say about the Bible? The Bible for Unity Truth students is all about finding the truth through this textbook. It's about interpreting it in metaphysical terms. Metaphysical interpretation has been around forever. Think about Greek mythology and all of those crazy stories that you read in Greek mythology. Do you think those things really happened, or do you think they were interpreting them metaphysically? I know when I went to college to become a minister here, I took that class. And that's what we did. We had to interpret that. And that's what unity does. We interpret it metaphysically. It is about the human evolving soul. We start out from the beginning of the Bible, and it is a spiritual guide to directs us from the Old Testament to when Christ came to the New Testament, and that is exactly how we evolve as humans. It is our spiritual guide through all of the stories, and there's interpretations for everything. Places, they mean something. They have a word. They mean something metaphysically. The events that took place mean something metaphysically. The people mean something metaphysically. But one thing that unity also teaches is that when you interpret the Bible, you interpret it from where you are, from what you understand as your truth at that given time. So that means that when you are going in to interpret something, you do it from your own understanding. It's not in stone, it's not fixed or absolute, that what one parable may mean to one person will mean the same to the other person. Because we're all in different places within our human spiritual evolution. So it's what you perceive through the story, through the Bible verse, that helps you direct you from exactly where you are. How beautiful is that? There's even people that will go into prayer and meditation and want an answer, want some guidance about what to do in a situation in their life. And they'll hold the Bible in their hand and they'll just pray about that and meditate on what they would like to see as an answer for them in a situation. And they will open the book and they will put their finger somewhere and they will receive their answer. It will be revealed unto you. They set the intention. They wanted an answer. They opened a book that is filled with energy, and the answer will be revealed to them. So however you want to use a Bible is totally up to you. But one thing unity also teaches is that your spirit knows exactly where you are and what you need to know. If you need to go to the Bible for that, that's fine. But your soul already knows what is needing to unfold within you by just asking. So that gives you a little bit about how unity perceives the Bible. Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, this big bad boy here. It is here at the church. I have my own at home. You're all welcome to take this and look through it. It has every city in the Bible in here. It has every name in the Bible in here. It has every single thing in the Bible in here that you can go to find the metaphysical interpretation. It also has the historical aspect. And we do look at the Bible as an historical textbook as well. So if you have questions, and if you're wanting to dissect something out of the Bible, this is the book to go to see what things mean. Another thing which I believe that all Unity students should have is the revealing word. This is just a small little dictionary. It doesn't go into all the cities and all that kind of stuff, but it tells you just simple words in here, like door and house and mountain and air, and just, you know, what you would find using the Bible.
What does it say for mountain?
Mountain?
I keep hearing that word.
You keep hearing that word?
Yeah.
Well, let's just take a look here. A mountain represents an exalted state of mind where the divine plan may be perceived and unfolded, a state of spiritual realization. Yes. So you can almost think in your own mind what things mean just by what they appear to be. And that's why we say you interpret it too from a place of your own spirit as well. So Charles Fillmore wrote the Bible dictionary. So let's I put a few things down here to kind of look at. The Garden of Eden. So Adam represents for us the beginning of life. Adam represents man. Adam represents the human collective consciousness. Human collective consciousness. Most everything in the Bible is about the levels of consciousness and how we go from one level of a lower consciousness to a higher level of consciousness. That's basically what the Bible is doing to help you to do. The Garden of Eden, or Eve, let's look at Eve. Eve represents the mother. Eve represents the feeling nature, the loving nature. And the Garden of Eden itself represents the divine consciousness, the ideal consciousness, where it's all heavenly, blissful. And that was the intention of God mind in our creation, was that we live in this place of bliss and heaven. And that's what the Garden of Eden represents. And when they went against God's will, what happened? They suffered those consequences when they were out of the will of God, and then they lived that hell. So there's heaven in the Garden of Eden, and there's hell when our consciousness is not living from that higher state of our spiritual connection with the divine that we are. So that's a little bit on the Garden of Eden. Cain and Abel represents conflicting things in your mind. Conflicting ideas you're having, negative and positive, the struggle that you go back and forth in. That's what the story of Cain and Abel represents. And this is just kind of a little summary that I'm going through here. Houses in the Bible metaphysically represent a fixed. They are fixed. Your consciousness is fixed when it's absolute and it's aligned with God. So take a look at your house. Take a look at your consciousness. What's going on in your house? Is your house filled with positive, or is your house filled with negative thoughts and feelings? Tents, they move. They transfer around. So they represent a shifting consciousness. Tents, when you see tents in the Bible, shifting consciousness. Churches in the Bible, they have congregation. They represent groups of ideas, spiritual ideas in the body. So that's groups of spiritual ideas because of the congregation that they have in a church. Inanimate objects, birds, animals, all the animals that you see in the Bible, the fishes of the sea, all of those are as well. Those are your thoughts. Those are your feelings. All the animals represent part of your thoughts and your feelings. And it's also how it's used within the verse or used within the parable. The temple of Jerusalem. We are a temple. The temple is within us. Jerusalem means spiritual peace. So when you are in the temple of Jerusalem, you are spiritually peaceful. So you'll see the temple of Jerusalem through the Old Testament as well as the New Testament. That means spiritual peace within your temple. Crucifixion and resurrection. We talk about this every Easter. Crucifixion is when we cross out error thinking, when we let go of false beliefs, crucifying them, getting rid of them, no longer living in the tomb of darkness. We crucify them. Resurrection is when we rise out of that dark state into the light, the eternal, immortal light. It's the resurrection. So these are just a few of the things that we interpret metaphysically in the Bible. Who would you be in the Old Testament? So in the Old Testament, who would you be? Would you be Abraham? There's a lot about Abraham in the Old Testament. Abraham represents faith. Abraham was given a message from God to pick up his belongings, possessions, and leave and go into Canaan. Canaan was a promised land, but it was also metaphysically stated as the body consciousness. Canaan was the body consciousness that God was delivering him to so that he could work through that body and obtain his realization of his spiritual nature. And that's why God directed him to go there. He picked up his wife and his nephew and was ready to go. But when he got there, there was a famine. And famine means some kind of trouble. So he lost his faith. He no longer had the faith that this is where God told him to go. And there was trouble there. So he, on his own, decided, well, I'm going to follow my own will instead of God's will. So he chose to go to Egypt. And Egypt metaphysically represents the darkness, represents ignorance. When you see Egypt in the Bible, that's what that represents. So when he came out of the will of God, that's where he went, was Egypt, and that's where he lost his faith. He became ignorant. He no longer was aligned with God. But then he came back, and he eventually got back to that promised land and followed God's will. And there he found heaven, and he was blissful again. So check out that story. Moses is another one that was directed by God to take his people to the promised land. And the Pharaoh army chased Moses. And the Pharaoh army metaphysically means fear, anger. All those negative feelings that were chasing Moses. But Moses kept on going to that light, that faith. He had such a strong, strong faith. So faith is very important when we read the Bible, because that's where we are all wanting to get to through each Bible verse and each story that you read. And that's the Old Testament. So now the New Testament, when Jesus is present now. Now Jesus at Unity is the humanness of man. Jesus represents man as a human. Christ is the spiritual essence, the divine essence. When we use Christ, we say here, I am Christ. We're affirming that I am divine. It's a principle. It's not a being, but a principle that you are divine. So we say, I am Christ. Jesus Christ lived from two consciousness. He lived from the human consciousness as well as the spiritual consciousness. So that's why we relate to Jesus, because he's relatable, because that is what we're living through and has, a human and also a spiritual being. So Jesus was able to give us so many examples. That's why we call him our way shower, because consciously we're in that same place as Jesus, being both man and spirit. Jesus Christ. Miracles, the actions he took are the same for us. So the New Testament is, I love the New Testament, and there's so many answers in the New Testament of how to live. I say so often when I'm in a situation, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? And that helps me to know, what would Jesus do? So the parables, there's so many parables. And a lot of these parables, the reason Jesus used the parables was so, do you know like what it's like to read a story? Doesn't a story stick in your head a little bit more than just like a conversation? When you read a story, that's what it was all about. Was Jesus was able to tell these stories that people remembered. They stuck within them, so they were able to remember them. That's why the parables, that's why they were said through parables, because Jesus knew that that would be more fixed for people. And I'm going to go ahead and read you the prodigal son parable, because this is one most of us know about. And it's in Luke 15, 11 through 32. Jesus continued, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the estate.' So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He longed to fill his stomach and the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will sit out and go back to my father and say to them, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his servants, 'Quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Meanwhile, the older son was in the field. While he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. 'Your brother has come,' he replied, 'and your father has killed and the fattened calf because he was back safe and sound.' The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. 'Look,' he answered his father, 'look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But with this, his son of yours, you have squandered, and your property with prostitutes comes home, and you kill and fatten the calf for him.'" So this is where you can interpret this in your own way. But when I interpret this, I see this one son who went out, and the pigs, those are representation of his thoughts. And the pig is one of the dirtiest animals. So he lived this life in these dirty thoughts, negative thoughts, down as low as he possibly could get, squandering, spending money, blah, blah, blah. And then here you have this other son who's done everything right, who's always wanted his father to recognize and celebrate that, despite his other son. And so that shows to me that no matter what you do, God's love is constant. There's nothing you can do, so much of good that you can do, or so much of bad that you can do, that the love of God changes. Because there's no judgment. There's no condemnation. It's the same constant, unconditional love no matter what. These two had to go through their own life experiences, in their own thoughts and their own feelings of being in different places in their consciousness. And they didn't need forgiveness because God does not forgive. God is constant all the time, unconditional love no matter what. The forgiveness comes within us for our own thoughts and feelings. So that's what I perceive out of that parable. When you read it, you may perceive something totally different, but that's okay. But in unity, it's about remembering that it's metaphysical and it is different levels of consciousness and looking at what all of these different things represent as you go through the reading. Okay? So that just gives you a little taste of how to take a parable and kind of dissect it apart a little bit. So the basic thing it's all about is a journey of self-discovery. That is what the Bible is to Unity Truth students. It's a journey of self-discovery. It's a journey of evolving our human soul. Starting out in the Old Testament with the conflicts and being at a lower level of consciousness, evolving to where we know that we are that Christ principle in the New Testament. And then once we get to that place that we know that, then the New Testament gives us all the examples of what to do as we live from that place. As Jesus Christ is our way shower. And that's where unity is with what the Bible is all about. So I've got a beautiful meditation. Meditation is huge at Unity. This is about 10 minutes long. I want you to relax into this meditation. It's in the meditation and prayer that the Bible comes alive for us, that we receive the answers that we need, either through the pages that we read or through the intuitive nature of our own divinity that each and every one of us are. So just relax in your seats and enjoy this beautiful meditation.
Gently close your eyes. Allow your body and mind